Hi, and welcome to the Your Story Studios podcast, a podcast where we talk about all things content creation. Today, I have Jon Tucker on the show, and today we are talking about switching camera systems, but mainly your camera gear journey. So, Jon, take it away.
Thank you. May I say your pastries are delicious, just to start? Mm-hmm. Yeah, so switching camera systems is something that's been on my mind for a very long time, and I've only recently taken the plunge, really. So I think in the last one we were talking about the GH3, where I started off, and ended up getting two of those and using those for a very long time. But then as it went on, just starting to think about wanting to upgrade and all that kind of thing, and I was looking at the GH5s that were out around that time, or had been out for a while. But then I came across something called the Sony Z90, which a lot of people don't know a lot about.
No.
And it's really strange. They're a camcorder, but they were like...
That would be why I don't know about
exactly,
it. Yep.
Exactly right. But they were like one of the first camcorders that actually had really decent video quality. And it really piqued my interest, and seeing a lot of reviews and side-by-side stuff with the GH5, I was like, they're about the same video quality. Well, at least it seemed that way, right? But this just had everything. It was just built for video. Like, you've got internal NDs, you've got just the ergonomics of it, the hand grip, great zoom range, like everything's built into it. And so I ended up going down that route, and that was like my first introduction to Sony cameras. And using that for many years, like, it just was like a Swiss Army knife. Like, I could do anything with it. The autofocus was amazing, which as a GH user was not used to. And it was just a joy to use, right? Fast forward a little bit, and then I start wanting to increase the video quality a little bit more.
And when you say increase the video quality, do you mean I want to be able to shoot 4K or 8K or 12K or 17K, or
No.
you just really want that blurry background?
Well, yeah, what was it? I think it was just, it's kind of like that X factor that I was looking for. I felt like I'd pushed the limits of the camera as far as I could, and I just felt like there was just this intangible, it's the intangibles for me, which makes it a bit hard to describe on a podcast, but it's that whole, when people, that overused word of like cinematic, like I just felt like I wasn't getting there, and I'm like trying to get to that next level. I think that's like with gear, you want to push it to the limits of what you can do with it. And then when you hit that limit, that's when you know it's time to try something else. So from there, I moved across to Blackmagic, actually, with the Pocket 4K, staying in the Micro Four Thirds world, having owned some of the lenses before. And then also just the lenses, I wanted to get into some cinema lenses, and the cost difference between Micro Four Thirds and full frame lenses is huge. And I thought I can get a whole set and, go down that route. So stayed with the Micro Four Thirds system, or went back to it kind of thing.
So you still had those Micro Four Thirds lenses?
Yeah, so I bought some new Cine lenses, but I also had a whole range of Lumix lenses that I could also use. So I thought that's like the smart thing to do, right? Use that earlier investments and all that kind of thing.
Yeah, I find that if you're going from one system to another, if you've got it's not just buying the camera body, it's also the lenses that go with it.
Yeah.
So you might think, I've got a budget of $10,000 and I'm going to spend $8,500, $9,000 on the camera, and then I've got $1,000 for a lens. Well, for like a full frame camera or something like that, $1,000 isn't going to get you very far, or at least the quality that you're probably wanting.
Yeah, definitely. And also when you get a new lens kit, like this new cinema lens kit, like you kind of want a kit. Like if I, in the Micro Four Thirds world, if I just have a 21mm, which is like a 42 in Micro Four Thirds land, like that's the one I use the most. But you're gonna at some point need a wide angle, and you're gonna probably need a telephoto at some point. So that's where the price comes into it, where you think I can get a whole kit, and that's what I need. And the image quality was great. I got to that point that was satisfying that X factor that I was after. But just after doing a lot of different types of jobs, I felt like that worked really well in a slower paced environment where you had time to set things up. But then a lot of times in like event shoots or, a bit more run and gun sort of style stuff, I found myself not being able to deliver in a hurry and that kind of thing. So then the next element of that was to go ahead with the GH6, which is out of that time. I thought I'll give that a go for a bit more of a run and gun versatility. And that worked really well in that environment. But then when I did want to build it up into something for like a bigger production, I just felt like, and this is going to cause some, I'm going to get some people not agreeing with me here, but when I tried to build that up into more of a production camera, I just kept hitting roadblocks. Like you could get power, some V-mount power into it, that was great. But then when you want to add XLR inputs, they add onto the top okay, but then where are you going to put the top handle? And I got a top handle that fit it, which was okay, but then it made it really high and all these things. And okay, now I need a monitor on it, but there's a lag on the HDMI out. And so then trying to pull focus with a lag on the HDMI is just driving me crazy. So then I got to the point where I'm like, I need this camera to just be stripped down, is what it is. It's great for that. But then what am I going to use on these bigger projects where I need, everything all in one and I need to do this kind of thing? And I've been putting off moving systems for so long for that price factor that you're talking about. Not only is it camera, it's lenses, it's everything, but kind of got to the point where I'm like, I really just need to, if I'm not going to move now, like when am I going to move?
Never.
Like, I'm just going to stay here because it's safe. It's like I was talking in the last episode. It's like at some point you got to take a risk, and that kind of thing.
And hopefully it pays off.
Yeah. And so had a look around at what was available. Coming from the Blackmagic, my heart wanted to go with the Nursa because I just love the image, really like the workflow. But being a bit smart about it, looked at the type of jobs I was doing. It's like, I really need something that's a bit more versatile. I don't use autofocus a lot, but when you need to use it,
It's so handy.
You need it. And that wasn't an option. And I thought, if I'm going to spend this much money on a system, I need to have that in my bag because a client doesn't care that you don't have a focus puller. They just
care about how much it costs and whether the video is good and solves their problem.
Exactly, yeah. And I came across the FX6 and a few of your videos talking about the FX6 and sort of was able to dive deep into that. And you may think this is kind of weird, but the way I looked at it was, this is like the Z90 on steroids. Everything I loved about that camera, like the FX6 is a cinema camera and it has that quality and
cinematic look,
right?
Yeah.
But everything, that usability and that all-in-one nature of that Sony Z90, it had all of that as well. Like it's got internal NDs, it's got, a top handle integrated, it's got the XLR inputs right there. With the right lens, you've got a good zoom range. It had a zoom rocker, so I've got a power zoom as well for those event shoots where I need that kind of thing. Like the hand grip, everything. I'm like, this is just like everything I loved about that camera, pushed to 11. And I thought, this has to be the camera that I go for. So I did buy that recently. And again, that was another one of those moments where like, okay, am I going to do this? Yes, okay. So you invest in that. Got a decent lens, and then I'm now in that period of migrating over. It's like,
which is an awkward period.
Yeah, I'm so used to having a full lens kit of every focal range that I want and all this kind of thing, and now I'm just slowly building that kit up again. Like that took me years to build up that kit, and now I'm sort of in that awkward in-between phase at the moment. So
yeah, well, when I went from Panasonic, so I was shooting with the Panasonic EVA1 and also the Panasonic S1 as my two cameras, and they were two cameras that had different sensor sizes, so Super 35 and full frame. They had different lens mounts, EF mount and L mount. So I had different lenses, but I had a lens adapter for my EF lenses to go onto my Panasonic S1, but I don't like lens adapters because it's just an extra piece of gear that can fail. So ever since going from that to Sony, I've never had a lens adapter. And I did think, oh yeah, I've got my Canon lenses. I could put the lenses on with a lens adapter, but then you hear horror stories about the lens is just not working properly. And you're investing so much into a new camera that you want to get the best out of it. And I knew to get the best out of it, I needed to get E-mount lenses for my Sony FX6, which was the first Sony camera that I purchased going from the Panasonic system. So yeah, it is a bit of a journey because you purchase the camera and then you need to build up the accessories with the lenses and all that kind of stuff. And when I started when I first got the FX6, I got the Sony 24-105 f4, and that's a really versatile lens. So for a lot of the stuff that I shoot, unless I really need that super shallow depth of field, it would do all the jobs that I was being paid to do. So that was a really good entry level lens to start with, but I don't own that lens anymore. I sold it because I eventually got the Sony 24-70 G Master 2 lens when it came out. And I also purchased for those more telephoto shots, I got the 70-200, but I originally got the f4 version because it was literally like half the price of...
It's a big difference in price, isn't it?
Massive difference. And it was the biggest difference really, from what I could see, was the one stop of light. If you do put it side by side, I'm sure the GM Sony lens is better. But I also heard some horror stories about the original Sony GM 70-200 not being great with autofocus and all that kind of stuff. So I held off getting that, and then they announced and released the version 2. So I purchased that, and I think to this date, that's the most expensive lens that I've ever purchased. When it came out, I think it was about 4,000 Australian dollars. So
definitely.
Yeah, big investment. So it's not something that you just wake up one day and go, at least for me, just, yeah, I'm going to buy this really expensive lens. You got to plan for it. And also you have to know that you've got the jobs as well that are going to justify getting
100%.
that lens. Because I know some people, they won't need a 70-200 lens for doing their real estate shoots or whatever. They would need to invest in wide angle lenses like the 16-35 G Master if they're on Sony.
And then you might find you don't really have much of a need for a 16 mil wide. Like even, when I was talking about, I had those cinema lenses I was talking about lately, I had those 3. I nearly never used the wide angle. And it seems like that 24-70 and 70-200, that's like, it's a very solid combo. I think you could probably do nearly everything you need to do just with those 2 lenses essentially.
Pretty much. I have gotten some gigs where I've got also the Sony 12-24 f4G lens. So not the GM because that's quite expensive as well. I went the cheaper option. I got that secondhand off Facebook Marketplace. So a good price. The person that was selling it, he bought it, used it a couple of times, wasn't using it, sold it to me. And I purchased it just thinking, okay, I'll have it so I've got that whole focal range from 12-200. Yeah, the 12-24 might only be f4, but if I really need to, then I can upgrade later. And I haven't needed to upgrade. I have been using it quite a lot. It's actually the lens that I use on my gimbal, on my A7S III, and I do a lot of in-store stuff for Coles. So internal training stuff, and they can put you in very small rooms. And you need to get a wide shot.
Yeah.
So on a full frame camera, at 12 mil, it can look a little bit comedic being so wide. But sometimes you just need to get the shot. But having that versatility of going from 12-24 on my gimbal camera, and the lens doesn't extrude out either, so it doesn't change the balance or anything like that. Even though I've got the RS3, that's quite good for the motors and balancing.
It can handle it,
right? It can handle it because sometimes I put the 24-70 on it and that does extrude out, and it still does the job.
Yeah. So it seems like, you've got your workhorse lenses that you use for most things, and then you got to have some get out of jail free cards as well. And as you say, they don't necessarily have to be the G Masters or the top notch, because they're just going to be used to have in your kit for when that sort of thing comes up. So yeah, I think that's a really good way of looking at it. Like the 24-105 that you're talking about, that all-rounder, I think you mentioned that's a good lens to start on, because you can kind of do most things with that. And that's like, I started with the 28-135 that I've got on there now, power zoom, which sort of fills that in for me at the moment. And also doing event work. Sometimes I film conferences and stuff like that. And so having power zoom is actually really important for that. And I can use it on live streams, things like that. So I thought that's a great all-rounder to start with. And then now I'm in the process of like, what do I want to add to that? And it's really hard. Like, I do want to go down the cinema lens route as well, like I have in the past, just because I really love the look you can get out of those, and manually focusing is so much better on those style of lenses. But there are so many times where, autofocus is really important. And so I think, and my wife helps me with this, not rushing in too much. And that's where I'm at the moment. The way I am, I just come up with an idea and I just, I'm going to get this set, or I'm going to get this one. And it's just like, put the brakes on a little bit and really think, like you said, what jobs have I got coming up? What's going to be important? I might like the look of the cine lenses, but really,
who's paying you for it?
Yeah, exactly. And as a one-man band primarily, like, is it more practical and make a lot more sense to get something like the G Master lenses and really build those out where they look great, but can also, you can run around on a gimbal with them and keep people in focus and all that kind of thing. So yeah, just still on that journey of trying to figure out where to go from here. But
yeah, I found myself just ending up thinking, especially with the Sony cameras, getting the Sony lenses, because there are extra features that get unlocked if you use Sony lenses. So lens breathing compensation. I really don't like lens breathing when I see that in images, especially like sit down interview stuff like this. If you're on a 24 with a very shallow depth of field and someone moves slightly, then it can do really weird stuff in the background and so distracting to me. So I love that Sony has figured out a huge flaw in their lenses and they use software or a firmware upgrade to be able to fix that. And when I see stuff like that, I'm like, what's next?
yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's just interesting because I guess that allows them to keep the lenses quite, smaller and lighter and have all these extra features. And if they can solve it in software, the problem's not there. So why not go that way? Just thinking about actually like another reason for the switch is I actually found a lot of the time when working with other production houses, I knew what I could do with my gear and everything like that. But as soon as, and people will hate thinking this, but when you're in the professional video production world and you say, I've got my Micro Four Thirds kit, you almost always feel like you need to make your case. Like you need to tell them why it's going to work fine. And, there's always a question to be answered. And if you look around, like something like the Sony FX6 is like it's an industry standard. It's nice to be able to not have that conversation come up. It's like, what gear do you have? I got this. Okay, cool. On to the next question.
What's your rate? Next question. What's your rate?
Yeah, and it's a real thing.
Absolutely, yeah.
And also another controversial one, but like client perception on set.
Absolutely, yep.
Like I felt like I got some really good stuff out of the GH6 and really nimble to run around with at an event. But the amount of people that say, you're the photographer, it's like, no. Or like,
does that thing take video?
My brother's got one of them. Yeah, he likes to bring that out at parties. It's like, okay, but like, it's just that thing.
Have you seen the image that this can do?
Yeah, exactly. But that was more of a slight annoyance. But then also when people are paying, the prices that they're paying for a video and everything, and you rock up with something that looks like a video camera, that looks...
Oh, a photo camera.
Yeah, oh no, yeah. So what I'm saying, like now with the Sony, you come up with something where it's like, that's a camera, that's why, they feel justified as well. And it's that other thing, it removes that little bit of friction that could potentially be there, and sort of you don't have to make an argument for it, it just kind of is self-explanatory a little bit, so...
Yeah, I was on a shoot earlier this week and I was using my FX6 with my Cine saddle and I had a light set up and we were filming at someone's house, some B-roll stuff. And one of the corporate people walked in and they were like, ooh, wow, because they see this camera that's all rigged out, they see a light. It's a lot more than just pulling out your iPhone, and which they might have been used to, like seeing people just pulling out iPhones and recording stuff that way. They're like, oh, this is serious. So client perception is a real thing. Thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah, well, it has become, like video production has become more democratized. Like iPhones can shoot really good video. When I started, if someone wanted to put a video out on social media, they'd have to hire a videographer because everything looked crap.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
But now...
Or they just put the low quality content out there, which can be seen as more authentic
to
the viewer. But yeah, today, the difference between an iPhone and I guess, a cheap mirrorless camera or even some expensive mirrorless cameras, the difference is quite slim.
Yeah, and it's like it's acceptable now. Like the image before it wasn't acceptable, whereas now for certain applications it can be. So you really have to, if you do want to make it, I think you do need to step up to that next level and actually get above all of that. And so the bar's a bit higher than it used to be, I think. Yeah,
Absolutely. So since going from Panasonic to Sony, do you have any regrets?
No regrets. Really enjoyed. I've only had a few projects so far with the FX6, so it's just been. It has really been, like I said, like that. The same joy I got out of using the Z90, or it's there. You put it on the tripod. It's got everything you need. It's reliable. Those things, like I was saying about a lag on the HDMI out, this and that. It just seems like Sony's been in the that professional tier for so long and had so much feedback over that time that all those little technical settings and details, they're all kind of like, after so many iterations, it seems like they've figured it out. So like when I think, I wish I could just, hang on, I'll look in the menu. You can do that. So
If you do find it in the menu.
if you do find it in the menus, that's one thing. Obviously, Blackmagic has. Like anyone that's used a Blackmagic camera, that is a joy to use when it comes to the menus. I really wish other camera companies could take a leaf out of that book there. But I actually haven't found them to be too bad. Sony menus, like I don't know. I know the mirrorless ones are different to the FX6, but just with the experience with the FX6. Which is quite similar to the Z90 actually. I think they had the same kind of menu system. That was like an XD cam kind of thing. But it's not too bad. And you've got your user menu that you can just put all your stuff in there. So I've actually found it pretty good.
Yeah, I used a Sony FS700 years ago when I was working at another employer. And the menus when I got the FX6 were somewhat familiar, but I do remember people when I first got it just saying, the menus are so bad and it's so unintuitive and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, they're figuring their stuff out. And I mean, when you go into the menus, you just have to go through it a couple of times and then you familiarize yourself with it and then it just becomes second nature. So I guess other camera companies might have more intuitive setups.
Yeah, I mean, even with the Panasonics, like the GH6, like I don't find that overly intuitive either. I feel like I'm still looking for stuff. I've used GH cameras for 10 years and I'm still like, which menu is the HDMI output in and why isn't it in the same as the, recording settings and all that kind of thing. So yeah, it's been surprisingly good, I think, from that aspect. But just really excited to shoot some more projects with it because, I'm still using the other cameras, around in the same projects and, probably looking for a smaller Sony camera or something like that, potentially to pair with it.
A B camera.
Yeah.
That sounds like an excellent topic to talk about.
Maybe we will.
Maybe we will.
In the future episode.
Correct, yes. All right. Well, to finish off and wrap up this episode, John, do you have any hot takes?
Hot takes. We want to ruffle a few feathers, do we?
You can if you want to.
Hot takes. Well, my hot take would be camera color science in 2024 is not a thing. Like, it's not important, camera color science anymore, would be my hot take. I feel like there's been a lot of arguments over time about, colors, Sony's better than this and
Canon colors.
Yeah. And
Sony's too green, too reptilian.
Yeah, all that kind of thing. I think, and as you said, a lot of people could argue about this, but now with color management and all this kind of stuff, the cameras are more of just a data capturing tool and they all have a bit of a look to them, but in terms of color, you can bring them all into the same area.
That's been my experience. And I think the biggest thing these days is what lens are you putting on the camera. So if you're putting Sony lenses on a Sony camera, it's going to look different to Canon lenses on a Canon camera. You might like the look of the Canon lenses on the Canon camera better than the Sony lenses on the Sony camera. But the colors, if you're shooting in 10-bit, go to YouTube University and then learn how to do some color grading, and you should be able to get very similar colors. I use a plugin called Cinematch, which does that for you. So you can say, I shot with the Sony FX6 and I want it to look like a Canon C300. And if you white balanced it correctly, if the footage isn't garbage, it's supposed to make it look like the colors from a C300. It won't necessarily be exactly a C300 because of dynamic range and all those different kinds.
And there's all those sort of things that make a difference. But purely, like as you said, people used to say, "Oh, Sony skin tones are trash" and all this kind of stuff. And it's like, I think that we're past that.
Yeah, they went from the 8-bit stage where you didn't have a lot of wiggle room to the 10-bit stage with S-Log3. And I think, a lot of people are a lot more happy with what they can get out of Sony cameras these days.
Yeah. And I think that the lens thing is a big one as well. Like you said, I noticed that from using my cinema lenses to my stills lenses, when I put the cinema lenses on, the color rendition changes completely.
Yep.
And, the reds are usually a bit deeper, the greens are a bit darker, and it's like, oh, wow, like it's a massive difference.
Mm-hmm. And even just the character of the lens as well.
Yeah. And I think cameras may have different characters. But I just think that color issue maybe coming from like people trying to grade S-Log by hand and not knowing exactly how to twist it, because a lot of these cameras log profiles, they're not just like compressing the dynamic range, they're actually twisting the colors to fit more information into the file. And if you don't know how to untwist it, then you're going to get some weird tinged colors and all this sort of thing. So knowing how to handle the process, I think, is a big part of it. But I'd say these days, just get the camera that works for you, has the features you need, gives you the dynamic range you need. And when it comes to colors, that's more so now up to you. Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you, John, for joining us today on the Your Story Studios podcast.
Thanks, mate.